With the help of Hashem, we are learning Megila Daf Chav Beis. We left off on Daf Chav Aleph Amid Beis. We're going to learn again over the last 2-3 lines before the bottom of the Amid. We are discussing how does one divide the reading of what we call Parshas Rosh Chodesh for the 4 people. Here I go back with my English. F-O-R for the F-O-U-R for the 4 people that the Mishnah says are called up to the reading, or the 4 readers of Rosh Chodesh, and we'll go over the challenge, and we're going to have a sugya that we also had in Tainus and Daf Chavav, and machlokes between Rav and Shmuel. Even though Rav and Shmuel in Tainus were not speaking about Parshas Rosh Chodesh, we're going to quickly review the special service that was done by the Anshe HaMaimed in their localities, which also included the reading of the Torah, and the challenge that they had, even though they only called up 3 people. But as we are learning now the sugya of Kriyas HaTorah, that one who reads will never read less than 3 psukim. And the parshiyos that were read by the Anshe HaMaimad, even if we'll just focus on Sunday, really you have to work it out the whole week, only has 8 psukim, and you're going to call up 3 people, and each one has to read 3 psukim. 3 times 3 is 9, not 8. So there's a machlokes Rav and Shmuel. Here are the words. Rav says doilig. Doilig is exactly what we do. Doilig means that one verse is read, and then it's reread by the next person who reads the Torah. Shmuel will hold poisik means that a pasuk is divided into 2. It means that you read 2 psukim and half. That counts for 3. The other person begins with the second half and the next 2. That's his solution. We'll go back. It's a good chazara. Why Rav disagrees with Shmuel, why Shmuel disagrees with Rav, and all how that works its way back in to the parsha of Rosh Chodesh. Now we're going to have a story today, and that will basically be a good synopsis of the whole daf. That Rav, who lived in the country of Babylonia, went to the city of Babel. It's good to have that clarity, that there was a city that was called Babel. When Rav went to Babel, 2 things happened that draws our attention. Number 1, he was called to the Torah, and he only made the bracha prior to the reading. He did not make the bracha post-reading. In the times of the Mishnah, one bracha was made in the beginning of all of the readers by the first reader. And then the bracha after the reading of the Torah was made only by the final person who read the Torah post-reading of the Torah. Rav was not a kohen. Excuse me. So we're going to have to figure out, when we say that he made the bracha prior, but he didn't make the bracha post, what Aliyah did he get? That will be one part of the inquiry to figure out, and this is going to be related to the one big question, by a Tainus Tzibur, do you call up 3 people or 4 people? Tainus Tzibur, whether that includes Tisha B'Av, or now Tainus Tzibur, we read the Torah Mincha. The Mishnah didn't speak about how many people are called up. That will be the big question. And we're going to use the story of Rav as an attempt proof. And the second anomaly that happened when Rav visited Babel is that here are the words that everyone fell on their faces during Tachnun, and Rav did not fall on his face. There was no nefilas apayim. So I know that a while back, not that long ago, I gave a throw out this whole idea of nefilas apayim, and Dr. Baruch asked, where is this from? It's from Megila Chav Beis. That the ideal position of Tachnun is falling flat on your face, extending your hands and your feet, the way we bow down in the Beis HaMikdash. When a person davens Tachnun in such a way, if they are great tzaddikim, God will answer their supplications. There are other nuances that we're going to quote. There's a shtickle Gemara in Bava Metzia Daf Nun Tes, right after the Tanur Shalachnoi, how the Gemara says over there that the wife of Rabbi Eliezer, who was just put in ban, make sure that he doesn't do nefilas apayim. We're going to go over. We learned that in Bava Metzia what that means. How Chazal asked that a prominent person should never do nefilas apayim, at least not in public, or the way Tosfos says when he's davening for the public. We're going to go over that Tosfos. And we're going to therefore come to the conclusion as to one of the reasons why now when we say Tachnun, no one falls on their faces. But it's the minig that you take your talis or you take your sleeve and you make sure that your face is not touching your arm, but there is something interposing. All of that will come in part from a sugya that we're going to learn today. We're going to learn the negative biblical commandment that one may not bow down to God properly, meaning extending one's hands and one's feet on the stone floor in any place other than in the Beis HaMikdash, and much, much more. So, Chevra, here we go. Mishnah said that on Rosh Chodesh you call up 4 people. We know what the parsha of Rosh Chodesh is, and now that we have these klalim that a reader will never read less than 3 psukim, so the first parsha in Parshas Rosh Chodesh has 8 psukim, right? Etc. So to give to 2 and each one 3, remaining with 3. Remaining with 2 psukim, that's a problem. Why is that a problem? It's chazar over the second to last line in the Amid, because the ein mishayden the parsha pachus mishloish psukim. If you're reading the Torah and you're coming towards the end of a real parsha, again to make it clear, when we say the parsha of the week, that's a nice word in English. A parsha is where in the Sefer Torah there's either a break of 9 letters. And then on that same line, you begin writing the next chapter. That's called a parsha sasuma, because the line is closed from both sides. Or there's going to be a break, and the whole line will remain open, and that's called the parsha psucha. In your respective chumashim, you're going to have a samach or a pei. That's the parsha that we're talking about. So when you're reading the Torah, you're coming towards the end of the parsha. Don't leave less than 3 psukim. Don't leave less than 3 psukim. In other words, the person that will be called up after you will be able to read the minimum 3 psukim in that parsha. So therefore, you can't give the first parsha in a Chodesh to 2 people, each one only reading 3. What must you do? Oh, well, amachaya, the minimum is 3, but you can have 4. Perfect. 8 is divided into 2. Nikra arba. That's great. You resolve the first 2 aliyahs. Problem is, we said in the Mishnah, you have to call up 4 people, which means that what pashu luhu? How much psukim do you have left for the next 2 people? Only 7. Oh, guys, theoretically 7 is great because minimum 3 per person. A person will say, "Amachayim." You have 2 more aliyahs. You only need 6 psukim. Problem is again the formulation of the 7. What's the problem? Because there are 2 more parshas left. The parsha which begins with the words of Yom HaShabbos, the whole parsha only has 2 psukim. The whole parsha only has 2 psukim. I heard a good word from my teacher. Why are there psukim? This is a big mystery. He told me that he read that whenever Hashem stopped teaching the Torah to Moshe, affording Moshe Rabbeinu an opportunity to review, which is mamash what we learned yesterday, learning the first time standing, reviewing sitting, that is where there's a parsha. When Hashem paused, giving Moshe Rabbeinu an opportunity to chazer, now there's still a lot more that has to be clarified. Why psucha? Why a sasuma? But let's go weiter. So the next parsha only has 2 psukim. The final parsha has 5. You have to divide this amongst 2 readers. Again, it's not going to work. Why will it not work? So we're learning the klalim. See, we have to know the klalim because we open up a siddur and you have the marks. It says, the Koyen Levi Yisrael. You have to know how this is made. Nikra trei mahanach v'chad mahanach. The third person, well, he can't read only 2. So he's going to read about Yom HaShabbos, 2 psukim, and he's only going to read 1 pasuk into the final parsha, which will be l'chayra great, because then the final parsha that has 5 will have 4 left over, which is more than 3. That's not okay. Daf chav beis, because of the other klal. Ein maschilin beparsha pachus mishloish psukim. When you go into a new parsha, you already read 3 psukim. You could have read 1,000 psukim. I don't care. If you enter a new parsha, you have to read at least 3 psukim in the new parsha. You cannot stop less than 3 psukim. And we're going to learn all the reasons in a moment in the Gemara. Okay, so you have to read 3. Now it's checkmate, because the final parsha only has 5 psukim. If you have to read 3 psukim into it, and this is all the third person who's getting called up, then there's only 2 psukim left. So likra trei maha. So I get it. The third person, the first guy gets 4 psukim, minimum 3. Second one gets 4, minimum 3. The third one is going to get B'Yom HaShabbos 2 psukim and 3 more. Problem is only Pashuluhu today. There's only 2 psukim left for the final reader, and you don't read less than 3. So Amar Loi, Let's chazer the names. So Rava tells Ula Barav, Zuloi Shamati, I never explicitly heard from my teacher the response to you. By the way, don't think that he didn't know the answer. He knew the answer from the way they did it in a shul, which is interesting. So it's about, you want to hear, you want to be able to, b'shem oimroi, not ma'alma dabar. Take a look what the people are doing. No, my teacher never taught me about this, but kayetze v'shamati. And it's self-understood that whatever was said there is going to be applied here. Where is the there? Guys, we just had this in Tainus. So for people who didn't yet learn Tainus, quick chazara, that just like the Kohanim and the Leviim were divided into 24 groups, the Yisraelim were also divided into 24 groups. Now, really, there are two purposes for that. Number one, there's an obligation for you to stand, lechatchila at least, on top of your carbon, for you to witness what's going on when the carbon is being brought by the Kohanim. Being that communal karbanos are being brought on behalf of all the Jewish people, so therefore it's ideal that there should be the Jewish people standing and witnessing and watching the offering of every carbon. It's not going to work. A society cannot work when you have all the Eden going into the Beis Hamikdash with all the miracles you can fit, but you got to go to work. So we appointed representatives that stood and observed the bringing of the carbon on our behalf. Yet, and they're called Anshe Maimed. However, the Anshe Maimed wasn't only people standing and observing. The Anshe Maimed themselves divided themselves into two groups. And two groups doesn't mean 50-50%. Actually, there was a much lesser amount of people that would actually stand and observe the offering of the karbanos on behalf of the Jewish people. But the bulk of the Anshe Maimed gathered in their towns during their week, and as we learned in Tainus details, they would, let's say, they would have special services. I don't really say the word Tefilla because part of it was reading the Torah. It's a good English word. So there were services that they did on behalf of everyone, including in that was the reading of the Torah. What Torah was read by the Anshe Maimed? So we learned in Tainus that they read about the creation. Again, they would call up only 3 people per kriya, and Sunday they would read the account of creation of Sunday and Monday, and Monday they would read Monday and Tuesday. And I know that really, if we would have time, it's not a big deal. It's good when you learn properly to cheshbon every day what they did. But let's just focus on Sunday. What's the challenge with Sunday? That Sunday, the psukim of Yom Rishon is 5. Bereshis bara Elokim until Vayer Vayikra Yom Rishon. I'm sorry. Yom Echad or Gewalt. Yom Echad is 5 psukim. The second day, Yehir Akiyah is 3 psukim. Same challenge. I mean, it's a different way of organizing it. 5 and 3 is 8. You have to call up 3 people. Every person has to read not less than 3. 3 times 3 is 9. So there we had the Tanach. We learned in the Mishnah by Yom Rishon they would read Bereshis and Yehir Akiyah. Day 1, day 2, and the Tanach Allah. This is expounded in a Brayso. Bereshis is comprised of 5 verses, and therefore it was divided amongst 2 people. Yehir Akiyah, which only has 3 psukim, was read the echad by 1 person. Now the problem is, how do you get 5 psukim to 2 people? And okay, that's the Brayso. Brayso added more than the Mishnah, but the Gemara has to add more. 5. How do you give 5 to 2 people? And the Havinah, and we have to understand Bishloima Yehir Akiyah, day number 2, which is made up of 3 verses. It fits. The echad, you can give it to 1 person. Why? Because the Tlasab Sukkah. So you have the minimum amount of verses. Elo Bereshis, how can the Brayso say that it was given Bishnayim? How is that possible? Chamisha Sukkah, it's only comprised of 5 verses. And then every reader has to read at least 3. And V'tanya HaKoyre B'Torah. And on that we have the answer. All of this is what Rav is telling all about Rav. The Itmar Allah Machlekes Rav and Shmuel. Rav says the solution is doileg. Doileg means you jump back. Doileg literally means you jump, means you reread. That's a word in English. No. This is what we do Rosh Chodesh. The V'amarta Lahem Zeha Isha Asher Takrivu Hashem. We reread. The Levi begins with the last pasuk that was already read. Okay, and here, okay, but Maimed, we didn't yet witness Maimed, and that's what happened. Chaysaf is just a shleimah, is that on Shabbos we learned, and perhaps on Yom Tov, the machlokes rishonim, you can add as long as you follow the rules. Here we're speaking about the need to say a pasuk twice. Shmuel Amar, you don't reread a verse. The way the solution is pasuk means you split a pasuk in half, and it's ironic because what pasuk do you split in half? A relatively small pasuk. The third pasuk in the Torah, the first pasuk is Bereshis, second pasuk is V'haretz V'yisrael V'vayu, the third pasuk is Vayemer Elokim Yehi Oin, Vayehi Oin. So according to Shmuel, the first person gets Bereshis, V'haretz V'yisrael, Vayemer Elokim Yehi Oin, Vayemer Elokim Yehi Oin. Then comes the Levi, Amen, Vayehi Oin. You divide a pasuk into two, and so that's it. So then the 5 becomes really 6. And now each one explains why they reject the reason of the other. Rav, who says, why does he not say Poisek? Because Rav holds, Kol Psuka Delei Paske Moshe. Delei Paske Moshe, guys, the Psukim, we just to know how to categorize this. It's Torah Shebal Peh. The Torah Shebachsav doesn't have a dot or the double dot, which marks the end of the pasuk and thus the beginning of the next pasuk. Just to know. So part of the Torah Shebal Peh
from Moshe.
From God, who told it to Moshe, who gave it to us, is where to start the psukim. So whenever Moshe told us this is the end of the pasuk, we don't cut verses into 2. I know that in Tainus we didn't speak it out, and I know that we're going to get into trouble with time, but I have to speak it out. The big question on this, there's many questions. When you hear the question, you'll say, take is Kiddush. Take. How do you begin Kiddush? Yom HaShishi. You are beginning in the middle of a pasuk. The hak's the pasuk in mitten. Now, no, Kabbalah, so what? All these nice things are beautiful, but they can't go against the formulation of the halachic rules. They're complements. So one of the big approaches from the Chassam Sofer is that the klalim that we are learning now is only shaykh to learning Torah and to reading Torah. The moment it's prayer and let's say songs, then you don't have a problem quoting the first half, beginning from the second half. There's no such a klal. That is a good answer that resolves a lot. But coming back over here, so here you're reading the Torah, you can cut it in half. Now, what about Shmuel? What Shmuel holds that you could cut a pasuk in half. Shmuel also agrees that ideally when you read the Torah, you got to stay faithful to the verses. You don't cut a pasuk into 2. Actually, in Tainus it was Chanina. So whether it was Chananya or Chanina or Chananya Kara means the big mumcha in Kara. Kara is scripture, right? Kara and Tana. Now what did Rab Chananya Kara say? Tsar Gadol hoyli etzel Rab Chanina Hagadol. It was very difficult for me to get the final heter, the following heter from Rabbi Chanina Hagadol. What was my heter? This Rabbi Chananya or Chanina Kara was a master teacher to children. And the way he taught children Torah, he's learning with them, is that it was easier for him to teach or for the children to chap, to grab, to remember, to understand by teaching parts of Psukim. Today, when you teach, the teacher is saying a word, teaching it, he's not saying the whole pasuk. He's not saying and we needed to get a heter, and it was with great pains that he allowed you to teach psukim to children, dividing them into parts, and he only allowed it because there was no other way. No, if you would have to say a whole verse at a time, children would have a much harder time learning. It's to teach them better. So the fact that everyone agrees to that, so you needed the heter. So why would you be allowed to cut it over here? So the Gemara says, well, actually, this is a proof for Shmuel. Hassan kaima mai mishum delayafshet. But a heter was given. A heter was given is because there was no other option for children to learn. So hachinami lo yafshet. So anachinami here lo yafshet. In other words, you only have 5 psukim. Bereshis is made out of 5 psukim. You have to call up 2 people. Hassan, whenever there's no option, then you are allowed to break the rule, and you are allowed, even in the context of learning Torah, reading Torah, teaching Torah, to cut it in half. Shmuel says, "Poisek." Now, my tamaliyam adoylek. Why didn't Shmuel subscribe to Rav's solution? So here we go. Gzeira mishum anachnasim and mishum hayotzim. What's the Gezerah Nechnasa means? People who are late comers. If a person, right, if you're going to stop less, guys, than 3 psukim into the new one, if you're going to stop less than 3 psukim into the new one, or let me say it differently, if you're going to go doilig, someone is going to come late into shul, they missed the Koren Aliyah. They begin hearing the Levi Aliyah. What does Rav say? You go back. That means you begin, Vayomer Elikim Yehi Or. He's going to count backwards. How many psukim do you have prior to that? Only 2. What will he think, the latecomer, that the Kohen only read 2 psukim? He's going to come with the conclusion that you can get away with reading less than 3. That's the Nechnasa. What's the Yoitzim? People who leave early. What's the pshat? People who leave early. He knows that Shlishi is going to be given Monday. Yirakia is the Shlishi. You're going to hear only Kohen. According to Shmuel, it's great. He heard that he stopped the middle of the pasuk. If he's going to hear the first Aliyah entirely, which was 3 psukim, then he's going to be yoitzim. He's going to leave early. He's going to count. He's going to see there's only 2 psukim left to the end. Either they're only going to give 2 psukim to the next person, or we also just learned right now that ideally you don't leave only 2 psukim until the end of the parsha. You go until the end of the parsha, or you leave 3 psukim. So you're violating that. So therefore,
considered about everyone.
Huh?
Shmuel is considered about everyone.
It's amazing that we are formulating kriya based on a non-ideal behavior of the people. We don't ignore what people do. Even if they're coming late or leaving early is not ideal, we take every Jew into account and we do the best we could for no one to think that we're doing something wrong, which is interesting. Now, Meisvei, we got a challenge.
It might be amazing, but we don't paskin that way. So maybe it's not always that way.
Correct, Danny. But still, it's the concept that Mishum Nachlas and Mishum Ayotz, and we had this also yesterday, that why do we make, okay, no, I want to go to Danny's point. The reason why nowadays every reader makes a bracha prior and post. Every reader makes a bracha prior and post. Mishum Nachlas and Mishum Ayotz. Same reason. Imagine how many millions of brachas were made since then, till now, mamish. Taking God's name that we're normally so careful. No, because people should know that a bracha has to be made prior and post. Who asked you to leave early? People have to go to work. Okay. Meisvei, the problem, this kasha is both against Rav and against Shmuel. Let's get moving with the joy. It says in a Braisa Parsha Shel Shisha Psukim, simple math. 6, you can give 2 people. Shal Chamisha, if it's only 5, you can only give it the Yachid. The Yachid means only to one person. Now, if the first one read 3 out of the 5, so Hasheni Kodesh Parsha Zu, Va'achas Parsha Acheres. And since you got 3, you can stop. The Yesh Oimrim, you can't. What we learned on top of the Amid, that once you enter a new parsha, you got to read at least 3. The Yesh Oimrim Shloisha. Why? The parsha, you can't enter a new parsha, even though you hit the 3 already. And again, the reason there is also because if someone will come into shul late, he won't know that they also read from the earlier parsha. He will think they began from this parsha, and if you are beginning from pasuk number 2, he'll think that the first person only got 2 aliyahs, only got 2 psukim. Now, the imisa means both Rav and Shmuel. The imisa, why does the Braisa say that if you have a parsha comprised of 5 verses, right, and you gave to the first person, you can only give it to 1? Why? Give it to 2 people. A parsha of 5 can be given into how? Either like Rav, by being doilik, Bal Koida number 1 reads the first 3. Bal Koida number 2 rereads the 3rd pasuk, 4 and 5. And Lamando Amar Poisik, then Nifsoik. Answers the Gemara, Bein L'Rav, Bein L'Shmuel, it's only b'diavad when there's no other option. Shani Hassan, the F Shabachim. In other readings of the Torah, you're not limited, you are only reading like Anosh Chodesh. Anosh Chodesh for only reading this. If you can read weiter, Gesundheit Heit, on the Maimed, you only read day number 1 and day number 2. That's where you have a problem. If you are able to add, then add.
Is there a reason why Maimed was limited to 1 and 2?
Yeah, we learned that in Tainus. It was really about the day of creation, but you have to add.
Because the 1, 2, 3.
Well, we don't want to do that. Where do we have something similar? I know, but it's not a problem with the psukim on Chanukah and on Chalamoid Sukkos. In other words, you have to add the next day. but you're trying to minimize how many days ahead you're getting. Okay. Omar Rav Tanchum, let's go. Omar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, halachic ki yesh oimrim. What's the Yeshua guys halkav that you must read from the new paragraph at least 3? People don't remember this because it was made easy for us. Everything is already marked in the siddur, but it's good to remember the klal. Now, so Omar Rav Tanchum Yeshua ben Levi, he made another statement. What was his other statement? As we just paskin like the yesh oimrim. So now he gave another psakim. That when you are reading in the first parsha, and you already read your 3 verses, don't stop if there's only 2 psukim or only 1 pasuk left to the end of this parsha. Also, what we had on Daf Chaf Aleph Amid Beis, right? That was these issues. So the Gemara says, Pshita, why was the second statement needed? Would we not know one from the other? Hashta halkap over here. Ma aschalta. The rule that when you begin a new paragraph, you have to go at least 3 psukim in. Who says that, guys? Only the Yesh Oimrim, which means that the Chachamim are lenient in that. Here there's a machloikas. The Kamekal Tanakama, he allows when you begin a new parsha, guys, as long as you got the total of 3, because you read in the previous parsha, you can get away with only reading 1. Yet machmire yesh oimrim, and that's what he paskin like. So shiur, this concept that when you are coming towards the end of a parsha, can you just leave over 2? Even the Tanakama agrees that you may not. Is like kolchchen machmire yesh oimrim. So in other words, once you said be paskin like the yesh oimrim, should you not automatically know that you can never leave from your current parsha less than 2 psukim until the end, less than 3 psukim until the end? So the Gemara answers, no, lav dafkem. Mao the tema, I would think that nechnasim, the latecomers, right? The latecomers are more common than people that leave early. So when you say that you have to read in the new parsha at least 3, like we said, that's for the latecomers, because if you're going to read in less than 3, you're only going to read in 2 psukim. Now, really, you only read in 2 psukim because the reader read also from the previous parsha. But the latecomer will think he's only going to get the next Aliyah. He's going to see they began only from pasuk 2 in the new parsha. He's going to think that the one prior only began from the beginning of this parsha. So that's more shchiach. So therefore, even when you say I paskin like the yesh oimrim, one might have thought only regarding that when you read into a new parsha, you have to read in at least 3 psukim, because the latecomers are more common than yoitzin. Yoitzin means to be shine and shul, and they're reading the Torah and you're leaving in middle. That's something less common. So, but one second, when you're reading a parsha, why is it that we're saying l'kula alma? You can't leave less than 3 psukim. Why? Because the guy that's leaving early will think that they're going to call up another person. They're not going to go into the next parsha. All there is left is 2. They're only going to read 2. The metzias of someone leaving early is less common. But the manchis, if you're so you would think that we don't paskin that you can't leave less than 3 psukim in this parsha. Or it's either go until the end or leave 3. Kumash Mulan. Indeed, we do so. Now the problem will be that the Tanakama says the opposite, right? Mishnah, why is it that shiure deloi b'shum yoitzin? I mean, the Tanakama's moida, guys, like we just said, that when you are reading a Koren parsha, either stop 3 psukim before the end or go until the end. Don't leave less than 3. But the Tanakama disagrees with the Yesh Oimrim. The Tanakama allows that when you begin a new parsha, you don't need to read 3 psukim into it. If you already have your total of 3 verses, aren't we saying that the fear is more common? So they answered. Now, the reason why the Tanakama says, I got no problem with you reading 2 psukim in the new parsha, it's gavaldik. I come into shul, guys. I came into shul by Levi. Listen to this. And I'm seeing that Levi is beginning only 2 psukim in the new parsha. So what am I going to think? Oh my God, the Kohen only read 2 psukim. I'm going to ask my neighbor, what, the Kohen only read 2 psukim? I'm in the shul, I have room to ask. And people will say, no, the Kohen began from the prior parsha. It was when you are in shul, the upside of a latecomer is that he's in the shul right now, and therefore manda ayel shayul l'shayel. Okay, shalach le'rabba b'rei Rabba l'Rav Yosef hilchas hamay, and this hilchas hamay, my friends, let's come back to us. What do we do Rosh Chodesh? Poisik or doilik? The pasuk v'yomarto lahem zeh ha'isha. What do we do? So he said hilchas doilik. And who is the doilig? The second one. Now, the second one being doilig, let me word it in the case of tainus, when you have 5 and 3. I want to say it's very simple. Yeah, we're speaking on the minute. The Rishon is 5. Doilig means that one pasuk is going to be reread. So who should be the one rereading it? The second. I'm sorry, is the middle one. Why? I'll tell you why. It's not ideal. May left and so he does it. What's the upside? The upside is that the first one read 3 psukim. Bereshis v'haron soiso v'yomer elokim yord 3 psukim. The only not ideal is the second one is going back. And again, what's the issue? That a newcomer is going to come and he's going to say, you're beginning from v'yomer elokim yehi or what? The kohen only read 2 psukim. Okay, he'll ask, so they'll tell, but he's in the shul, so they'll tell him, no, that they're rereading the pasuk. And so you have 3 psukim, and you have 3 psukim of Yom Rishon, and then the third Aliyah is kasher. He has 3 psukim. What will be the other way? That the first one is going to read 3 psukim, and the second Aliyah will begin from the second to last pasuk in day number 1. So Vayar Elikim, thank you. Vayar Elikim is like you tell you. So the problem will be that now both the second and the third are doing not ideal. Why both of them? So instead of having 1 Aliyah not ideal, 2 Aliyahs will be not ideal. We just learned right now. Because then the second one, there's only 2 psukim left of the first parsha. So to get 3 psukim, he's going to have to read into the next. We just learned that reading into a new parsha, the Yeshayim say, you can't read less than 3 psukim. He'll have to stop. Not only will he have to stop, day number 2 only has 3 psukim. If he read 1 to complement his 2, then the third Balkoida, the third one will have to be doilig. So if you're going to leave the doilig for the third one, it's not only you did doilig, then the second Aliyah and the third Aliyah is not ideal. Masha Enkin, if only the Emtsoi, which means the Levi, is the one that does the doilig, at least the first one was ideal. The third one was ideal. The only Mickey Mousing was on the second one. It's 8. Okay, let's go back. Okay, these are technical things, and it's very not seichel is not needed, just the technicality. If you have a chart, Kevin, where's your chart?
But that's only in this specific situation of these 8 psukim, right? Meaning if you had a different setup, then maybe
Danny, exactly. But the content means that whenever you have to doilig, do it in a way where the minimum readers will do something not ideal. In the case of tainus, correct. It goes on the case of tainus. It goes on the case of Yom Rishon of the mind. Okay. Says the Gemara, referring back to the Mishnah. Zeh klal, kol sheyesh by musaf, but it's not Yom Tiv. You call up 4 people. Zeh the Gemara by Elyahu. The one topic, the one kriya that's not mentioned in the Mishnah, my friends, is tainus tzibur. Bekama, how many readers are involved? Question is 3 or 4. What's the tzad? What's the logic for each side? Do we say Rosh Chodesh and Moed means Chala Moed? Since the Ikar Carbon Musaf, that's why you add 1 more. Aval Hacha, meaning on a communal fast, like a Carbon Musaf, there's no Carbon Musaf, therefore there should only be 3. Loi means Nisht Fir, Yadrai, Oidilma, Hachinami, Ikar Musaf Tefilla. Guys, we learned tainus. Why do we add on a tainus tzibur? Anenu. So there is something special. There is an added tefillah. So Tashema, let's try to resolve it from our Mishnah. Let's from an inference. Our Mishnah writes, B'Rosh Chadashim, or B'Chayil Shal Moed, you call up 4 people. No, Neka Pashat, no family. Is the Charaya, how about tainus tzibur? Only 3. Says the Gemara Zoi, I'll give you the opposite inference. Ema Seifa. It's emanation. How did the Mishnah begin? B'Sheni, B'Chamishi, and Shabbos Mincha. You read 3. I'll have the same Torah. Only then 3. But ha tainus tzibur arba. Elo, therefore, maha lekel mishma mina. You can't make an inference when you can come to the opposite conclusions by being medayik deresha, being medayik from the mitziyasa or from the seifa. So Tashema from the following story. And this is the rest of the story. Rav once traveled to the city of Babel. When on a tiny sibur, Kom Kara B'Sifra, he was called up to read from the Sefer Torah. Guys, in those days, whoever was called read. Now, which Aliyah did he get? This is good shul, juicy shul politics. Guys, Rav was not a kohen. What happened was that we know that Pasach Baruch, mean before the reading, he opened with a bracha, Chasim v'loi Baruch. But when he concluded, he didn't make a bracha. A heads up, Rav, even though he's the early Amiroim, Rav Tano Palik, Bisman Rav, what we learned yesterday, because of the Nechnasim and Yoitzim, everyone made a bracha prior and post. That was already normally in effect in that time. Okay, number one. Number two, while they were saying Tachnun, everyone fell on their faces. They used to fall on the ground on their faces. So let's add the detail. Not only did they fall on the ground, but they did a proper hishtachava, they bowed down. Bowing down means that they extended their hands and their feet. They extended, whether they extended it, lahavdol, like Superman, or whether they extended it on the side, that's a good discussion. But they spread out their hands and their feet on their stomachs. That's the position they had. And they had their forehead on the ground, with details that we'll learn in a moment. And the Rav didn't fall tachnun. He had a Chassidish yard set that no one knew about. But we'll see exactly. That question is, why didn't he fall tachnun? So, first of all, behold, Rav be Yisrael Koren. Rav was given the Aliyah called Yisrael, because we know Rav was not a Kohen and not a Levi. So, my Tamachasam Alei Barach, Yisrael is the third one. You know what we're trying to prove from here, guys? It's like a Keraya, Shleima. If you call up 4 people on Tainus Sibur, so even though Rav was not a Kohen or Levi, which one would you give? There was no Shishi. So you give the first opportunity. So he got Yisrael. There is someone being called after him. That will explain why Chasam v'li Barach. You know what it doesn't explain? Why did he make a bracha prior? I get that. The Gemara is going to speak about in a moment. But the only reason why he would not make a bracha after the reading is because there's someone else reading after him. In other words, this is a proof that on a Tainus Sibur, 4 people are called up and he was given Shlishi. So the Gemara says, "Look, there's no raya. Why not? Rav big kahana kara. Rav was called up in the place of a kohen. B'reshus kohanim, whether it's emes or not. Gaboim love it. B'reshus kohanim. What's the raya? That if you have a exceptional great tzaddik, even if there are kohanim, right? You get their permission, and this extraordinary Jew will be called first." The proof is from Rav Huna, which we also know that he was not a Kohen, he was not a Levi, but when Rav Huna came to your shul, you know what Aliyah he got? Kara b'koyhana. Says the Gemara, no. Bishlem Rav Huna kara b'koyhana, the 4 line before the bottom of the Amid, the widest lines, because even Rav Ami and Rav Asi, which they were the Koyhane Chashidi, the Arad Yisrael, they were still meikav kaifulei Rav Huna, they were subservient to Rav Huna. In other words, whenever Rav Huna was in an environment, even if he had the greatest, let's say, giants of the Holy Land, Rav Huna was from Babel. Rav Huna was the accepted greatest Jew of that time. And that's why indeed it makes sense that no matter where, he would get called first to the Torah. But since Rav lived at the era of his contemporary Shmuel, now Shmuel was a Kohen. Not only was Shmuel a Kohen, but udevar alei. This is very important. So Rashi points us to Baba Kama that whenever Rav and Shmuel would come to an opening, who would enter first? You have to see that image. You go first, you go first, you go first, you go first. Shmuel went up first. Rav gave the cover to Shmuel, which means that Rav considered Shmuel greater than him, or he was machaber him. So the moment you have such a scenario, he's not like the undisputed greatest person of that time. So why would Rav be given Kohen? Now, does that mean, Shuki, that Rav should not be given Kohen because Shmuel was in the shul? I understand that even if Shmuel is not in the shul, the fact that this doiroi, there was someone that Rav himself considered greater than him, then Rav should not get Kohen. So Gemara answers, no, really, Shmuel nama make of Rav. Shmuel was really bottled to Rav. It's only the Rav who the Avad covered. This is part of the greatness of Rav. In spite of the fact that Rav was greater than Shmuel, Rav was machabed Shmuel only when Shmuel was there. But Shaloi B'fanav, Rav really didn't consider Shmuel greater than him, and therefore it's correct to call up Rav b'Mekoim Koyim. And
Rabbi,
all
is
that
that
means,
So it's the greatest
Is that
guy
why we?
in the- Yeah,
Is
go
that why
ahead,
we
Shmuel.
say is Shmuel? Is there any reason Shmuel is also a Tanavale Polig? I mean, if they were.
no, we don't say that because very good. So here that explains that Tzvika that Rav was taka greater, and we don't say that on Shmuel. Rav is greater than Shmuel. It's okay to give Rav Koyim. And therefore, there's no raya by the fact that Rav did not make a bracha post. He didn't make a bracha post, not because there are 4 readers. Could be there are 3 readers. But after his Aliyah, came a Levi. Didn't come a Levi. Came a Yisrael. But came another 2 people, which is why he didn't make a bracha post. Okay, let's go back. And Hachanam in this tabra. The Rav Kahana Kara, this is the best daf. Rav got called Kohen. The Is al Kadaitach, that he only got called Yisrael. So and let's go. You're good. Kind of Sibir has 4 people, by the way. It doesn't. We know it has to, but let's go. Has 4 people. So you explained why Rav made a bracha, didn't make a bracha afterwards. But if he got called Yisrael, then lifonel my tama baruch. Why did he make a bracha before? In the times of the Mishnah, only the first one makes before and the last one makes afterwards. So the Gemara says, that's not a problem because la'achar takana. They made a takana that every single person should make a bracha prior and post. The problem is, now we're back. If every Yid makes a bracha prior and post, he should have done both. And the answer is better than the question. This answer is better than the question. Why do we make a bracha prior and post? We learned yesterday, the way Rashi learns. The chnasim and yoitzim. You don't want a person who leaves late to think that there isn't a bracha after the reading. People would come late when Rav was in shul. But when Rav was in shul, no one would leave until the end of Kriya, out of respect of Rav. That's a chutzpah no one had. So the Gemara answers, Shana heichad b'yosef Rav. Even though people still came late. People, when the Rebbe was here, people came after the Rebbe. Chutzpah. But no one left early when the Rebbe is in the Beis Medrash. How great is this? And therefore, there is no raya from the story. Let's go weiter. So we're back to the question. Tiny Sibra, 3 or 4. Tashuma. I can see the smile on Avashi's face when he was putting this together. Gaboim appreciates it. So Tashuma, Zaklal called Sheyesh boy Bittel Malach La'am. Why is it that we say 3 and not 4, or 4 and not 5? And don't make koisafas. All of that is because if you add another person reading, people have to go to work. It's all about people are so careful with their time. Every second is holy, so you can't add another second. It's going to bother everyone. Bittul malacha. So he says that if there's going to be kol sheish b'bittul malacha la'am, going kind of sibur and Tisha B'av, guys, I know it's getting late, but you are not only allowed to work on a tiny sibur, even though we learned guys together that we try not to work until chatzois and ein royasim and bracha la'olam, but halachically you are allowed to work. On work days, people work. Whenever people work, adding another reader holds people longer in the shul. That is what you're not allowed to do. Only Koren Gimel. This is clear. If people anyways are not working, or if people anyways are working less, so if they're going to have another koira in the shul, you're not being mevatel them from their work. They aren't in saivinish. Going, for example, Rosh Chodesh.
Is this another reason on top of the Musaf connection that we made before when we read 4?
Something that we did not mention in the Mishnah. Very good, Danny. Very nice. Because, Musaf is like to be machabed the kriya. And here we're going in the other way. You can't be machabed it when you're making people antsy. They want to get out.
It's like a practical
This is great. Now, by the way, Rosh Chodesh, Pitul Molacha, so that's the Rashi. Rashi writes that since none of the women participated in the Cheto Egel, that's from a Toisus, from a Midrash, they were rewarded and Hashem gave them a yomtiv. What's the yomtiv for women? Rosh Chodesh. And Chassidus says, why dafka Rosh Chodesh? Because the whole idea of the moon being buckled to the sun. The moon has light, but it knows it's not my light. That's the anti-Avodah Zarah. What's Avodah Zarah? Ich ben ametzias. And people that the women understood that there is my role to play. But it's not me. It's me simply being zoicha to reflect the light of God. they're connected to the moon more than anything because they didn't survive by the Zara. So it's not only that women don't do melacha or they diminish their melacha. On Rosh Chodesh, really, it must be that men should also work a little bit less. Point is, since you are anyways working a little bit less, we are able to add more readers. And the same thing on Chodesh Shel Moed, that God willing, we're learning Mamash next Masechta about you. It's not so pasha to go to work on Chol Moed. Now, B'davar ha'aved, that's the common heter. There are reasons which justify working on Chol Moed, but there should be diminution. So since people are anyways not working that much, so spending another 2.5 minutes in shul is not the end of the world. So by the way, clear, the Braisa speaks about Tainus Tzibur and Tisha B'Av explicitly, that on these days you only call 3 people. Amar Ravashi. Now there is a Braisa. Question is, maybe there is a Tana that disagrees. So Ravashi challenges, well, you're quoting me a Braisa for ha anan loy tanan hachi. He goes back to our Mishnah. What does our Mishnah write? Zehaklal. Shuki, here you have again a Zehaklal. So Zehaklal kol yom sheyesh by Musaf ve'ein yomtiv koren arba. Why did the Mishnah have to write it? La asuye mai. Is that not la asuye tainus sibur and Tisha B'Av? And what's the Musaf, guys? Musaf doesn't mean a carbon. Musaf means the prayer Anenu, as we had on Amud Aleph. So imagine Avashi is trying to make a diuk to show that there's a machlokes tanoi. So therefore, don't quote me the Braisa. I see from the Mishnah otherwise. And if I have to choose Braisa and Mishnah, I pass it like the Mishnah. Frek the Gemara, hold on. Ul Ravashi masnisan mani. If Ravashi's understanding of the Mishnah is correct, then who authored the Mishnah? Like Tanakama v'lei Rabbi Yosi the Tanya. This Braisa is speaking about Tisha B'Av. That Chali is B'Sheni B'Chamishi. If Tisha B'Av falls on a Monday and Thursday, which anyways are days in which the Torah is read, then indeed 3 people are called to read the Torah. However, Mondays and Thursdays, there's no mafter on Tisha B'Av. Soilu, sola, that's on the day of Tisha B'Av. Then you add mafter, mafter be'echad. The after be'echad means that the 3rd person gets to read the mafter, not you add a 4th. Like on Shabbos, we read 7 and then we read again. No, the 3rd one reads the mafter. However, if Tisha B'Av falls out on Shlishi Revi, and what else, Chevra? And on Sunday and on Friday, it means on days in which there's no Kriyas HaTorah, then only Koida Echad u'mafter Echad. Tanakama doesn't say 4. He also doesn't say 3. It's 3 or 1. Rabbi Yosi says Lo'olam Koidem Gimel u'mafter Echad. So here you have a Braisa that quotes already more detailed. No one says you read 4. So therefore, Ravashi, it's such a doichik, your understanding in our Mishnah, because then our Mishnah will be, we won't know who the author is. So the Gemara goes back, Kasha Ayu Ravashi, how did you come to the conclusion that our Mishnah is saying 4? Because of Zaklal, says the Gemara Loy. No. Zaklal is not including fast days. Not including fast days. What is Zaklal including? That on Rosh Chodesh and on Chol Moed you read 4. Guys, remember this Gemara. Zaklal always means you are including another case. Here, the Gemara is telling Ravashi, no, here, Zaklal is basically reiterating that which the Mishnah explicitly wrote. Now, why would you do that? The Mishnah just wrote clearly, B'Rashi Chadashim, and on Moed you read 4. Why would you write Zaklal? So the Gemara says, here you need it. Why do you need it? Simana ba'alma yohav. You have to give an additional siman. An additional siman really means that people learned Mishnayos by heart. We wanted you to say it again. Why? Because you might have thought that Yom Tov and Chol Moed should be the same. You might have thought, my friends, that on Rosh Chodesh you only read 4. Chol Moed you have to read 5.
In Chanukah we read Chanukah is no Musaf. Chanukah.
Again, back to Chanukah Mati, you're very good. The Rebbe is not addressing Chanukah. Yeah. And by the way, you read 3, correct? But you're making a good point. We are ignoring Chanukah throughout. Now, the reason why it's so wide, guys, Chol Moed, you can't argue, even for us, meaning not even, we're from a Yidden. Chol Moed in our minds is holier than Rosh Chodesh. Many people wear Big Day Shabbos. I know these are nuances. So, why do we put Chol Moed with Rosh Chodesh and not with Rosh Chodesh? Because that's the cloud. And Danny, that goes back to what you said. No, it's the Bittul Malacha is a technical reason, and now we're going into an intrinsic reason. Call the Tafile Milsa Mechavrei. Any day that has something more, Tfei, has something in Kedusha more than another day. So Tafile Gavra, you say to you, add another Koida. Still therefore, Rosh Chodesh and Moed, they are one notch more than a weekday. How are they one notch more? The Ikar Karban Musaf. Koren Arba. Yom Tov is one step more than Chol HaMoed. The fact is that you have many Hatedim to work on Chol HaMoed, and there's no Hatedim to work on Yom Tov. So if you would make Chol HaMoed like Yom Tov, then it wouldn't fit this pattern that a day that has something more chamur has another reader. Wouldn't work. B'Yom Tov, the Asar Basiyas Malacha, Chamisha. B'Yom Kippur, it's amazing, guys. Yom Kippur is less than Shabbos. It's more than Yom Tov. Why? Because if a person, God forbid, works on Yom Tov, what's the punishment? B'Mezid, Malkis. What's the punishment for doing Malacha on Yom Kippur? Kares, Shisha. On Shabbos, what's the punishment for working on Shabbos? Skila, Yeshiva. And to fit this klal, the Rebbe added Zak klal, you got to put Chol HaMoed together with Rosh Chodesh. Bottom line is that Tainus Sibur is a day in which you read 3, and Mati makes a good point. You want to go call the Tafele Mechavrei. So on Chanukah, there's no Anenu, there's no Hoisafa in prayer. It's even less than Tainus Sibur. There is no, on Chanukah, there's no Musaf. Daven the Shmusaf. It's a Yontav D'Rabbanan.
Al Anisim is not called a Hoisafa in prayer?
No, because you're not adding a whole bracha. You're not adding a whole bracha. You can say more. You can say you had Halal. But I'm saying the fact
Anenu is also in the middle of a bracha.
There's no Bittul Malach. I think it's also, there's no, there people who work on Chanukah, and if you're going to make people stay in Shul Nebuch another minute, they're going to go out of their minds. They have to go to work. So yeah, only give 3 readers. Okay. Weiter. Gufa. People who come to a Lubavitcher Shul with all the Kadeshim that we say at the end, the last Kaddish that Rabbanan, go try to do that in a non-Lubavitcher Shul. You'll see the Bit Malacha coming up. Gufa, we learned. Rav went to Babel, and there wasn't a tiny sibur. And the first thing we dealt with, Kara, Besifra, they called him up to the Torah, and here, guys, let's go with the Rav was given Kohen. Let's go with that. So Pasach Baruch, he made a bracha prior, and that was already, again, at the time that everyone made a bracha prior and post. But Chasam v'lei Baruch, when Rav finished the Kohen Aliyah, he turned around, he knew no one is leaving Shul when he's there. So there was no need for him to make a bracha post. There's no fear of the yoitzin. There's going to be no yoitzin. So we dealt with that. Now, naful kol alma payu. Everyone fell on their faces. The way Tachnun used to be said. But Verav le'nafal anpei, Rav did not properly prostrate himself during the recitation of Tachnun. The question is, my tama le'nafal, my tama Rav le'nafal anpei. Answers the Gemara, there was a floor made out of stone, and we learned in a Braisa, based on, I think it's the last pasuk or the second to last pasuk in the portion of Bahar. Mama Shatiyan, it says, Ve'eben maskis, a stone covering, don't put it in your land to bow down on it. Now, guys, if this would have been an issur of bowing down to Avodah Zarah, it has nothing to do with the stone floor. You may never bow down to Avodah Zarah. Number 2, it's not in your land. This is not about bowing down to Avodah Zarah. This is about bowing down to God Almighty. If you are Ba'artzechem, what's Ba'artzechem? Any place outside the Holy Temple. The Holy Temple is God's land, so to say. If you are outside the Beis HaMikdash, even though you're bowing down to God, you may not bow down directly on a stone floor. We're being medayik. One second. And like Ula said, the Amar Ula, when Ula learned this pasuk, without Ula, you might have understood that this is just another verse telling you not to serve idols. Ula's emphasizing, no. If the pasuk would have been speaking about Avodah Zarah, yeah, Shleima, what Avanim? I don't care. Avanim ate him. You can't bow down to Avodah Zarah. Period. Yaharag val Yavor. No. This is bowing down to God. But there is an issur not to bow down. Now, there's reasons for that we won't get into. And the way you circumvent it is by putting something that interposes not the knees of your pants that they shouldn't never get dirty. You have to put something in between your forehead, which is the part of your face that touches the ground and the stone floor. Very important.
And tiles are considered stones, Rabbi, or not?
We have you can Rabbi Google will bring you all of the poskim that say this and that and the other. It's very common that people don't do it on tiles. We paskin that we don't have to interpose on tiles, but the marble is different. So it's many shuls have a stone floor,
So what was going on with the rest of the people that they were doing it and Rav wasn't? They didn't hold by this stone issue?
Well, I was going to ask it in a good line. That's why we shouldn't interrupt. I just want to add something else that really, just to speak it out. On Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, our minig for the men is that we bow down either once on Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, various times. The way we bow down on Rosh Hashanah, even if someone did it on a stone floor and they didn't put anything between their head and the floor, they didn't violate biblically this violation, because one may only not do hishtachava on a stone floor. Hishtachava, pishut yadayim v'raglayim, is something that we never do. We get on our knees. We're going to learn. Let's get to the bottom of the Amid, and taka we fall on our foreheads. Beautiful. More than we do the rest of the year. Hishtachava means to lay flat and extend your hands. Either your hands are extended in the front or your hands are extended to the side, as was done in the Beis Hamikdash. There is where it's biblically prohibited to bow down if it's directly on a stone floor. So now the problem is, if the issue has nothing to do with tachlin, no tachlin, it's an isur d'oraisa. No one should have been allowed on that shul that decided to make a stone floor that didn't have the little shmatalach, so there was no option. No one should be allowed to bow down. So the Gemara answers, that they only put the stones in Mizrachman. They only put the stones over there in the front. Only kamei derav havoi. The rest of the shul, they were standing over there in bubble, mistam on a nice, clean, the dirt floor. There you can bow down. So 1 second, if in the same shul there was an area where you can bow down, go take a couple of steps here and there. So the Gemara answers, no. Rav, if he would have walked, the shul is packed. You can imagine that Rebbe's in the shul is packed. So they're making room for the Rebbe to walk amongst the people. It's very difficult to make a kriyas yamsu. Another answer, that since Rav Pishut Yadayim Raglayim Hava Ovid, he was bowing down by tachnun the way we used to, and everyone else was not falling on their faces tachnun the way Rav was. Ula told us to Amar Ula Ella Pishut Yadayim Raglayim Belavad. But everyone else who only partially fell on their faces, they didn't do the real ideal way of doing tachnun, they were allowed to do it on a stone floor. So now the question is, let Rav do it like them. So the Gemara says Rav had no option, because Rav always did a proper pishut yadayim v'raglayim. Loi meshani miminhagei. Rav was not going to change his usual custom. That everyone was bowing down properly. Everyone in the shul was doing pishut yadayim v'raglayim. However, adam chashuv shani. There's an interesting rule that a prominent person, people who everyone looks up to, that he is the tzaddik, he's the Rebbe. The power of tachnun, of getting a response, lamata masara tvachim, is greater than in any other part of prayer. So when a person davens Shmona Esrei for the fuah, and the fuah doesn't come, it doesn't disturb the olam as much as someone who davened for the fuah during this type of tachnun, laying on the ground. If they are not responded, people are going to think either tachnun doesn't work, or they're going to think this person is not a tzaddik. Because if you're a tzaddik, it's going to work. And therefore, tzaddikim have to be careful. If they feel that they have a suffix, maybe my prayers won't be answered, they should not do this type of nefilas apayim in public. Tosfos says, second to last Tosfos. So if you're not a tzaddik and you won't get answered, people will understand. But dafke, because Rav was the tzaddik, only he, forget about there was no stone floors. He did not want to, in public, make such a tachnun. Kid Rabbi Lazar, Damar Rabbi Lazar, ein adam chashuv r'shoy lipol panav. Adam chashuv means a tzaddik, ele imkein ne and ne. Unless he knows for sure, God will respond to him. Now, where do we know that unless you are certain, don't in public fall on your face? We learned that from the story of Yeshua ben Nun, that Vayomer Hashem Yeshua, kum lach, or kum lacha, and the pasuk continues, lama zeh aton noifel al panecha. He was reprimanded for falling on his face. What a beautiful concept. Now, I want to remind everyone, in Tanu Shalachnoi, after Rabbi Eliezer, at the end of the story, that the great Rabbi Eliezer was put into a chedem. It's a very difficult story. And the Gemara writes clearly that from when he was put into a chayrim, the Gemara says his wife never let him fall on his face. So when we learn Bava Metzia, I forgot which Mefaidish says the koyach of Tachnun, that if you are an Adam Gadol, you will get an answer, is only if you don't make a hefsik from the Shemona Esrei to Tachnun. If you're davening b'tzibur, Baruch Hu Baruch Shemai Amen is not called a hefsik at all. But if someone makes any interruption, their Tachnun loses its power. So what she did was, now she knew that he was makbid on his chaverim that put him into chayrim. If he would have davened when he fell on his face and he did tachnun, the pishu yadayim v'raglayim, Rabbi Eliezer, if he would have davened for something not positive to happen to his colleagues, that not positive would have happened. So to save his colleagues, every day she would ask him a question between Shemona Esrei and tachnun, and that was it. So she made the break. It's a very big takeaway that if a Yid, we all have things that we want God to answer us. I'm not saying that we should not be careful on the rest of the prayer, but the most powerful part of Tefillah is Tachnun. And even though nowadays we don't properly fall on our faces, we don't do that, but still there's a big koyach. There's a big koyach, and the idea of falling down. We spoke about Hamelach HaYoshev, that every Tefillah has an effect. The reason why sometimes it doesn't manifest is only because, it's coming down the Ishtalshus, it got stuck. When we make that movement of going down, it brings the bracha all the way down. All of the brachas of Shemona Esrei come lamata masara tochim by tachnun, especially by pishay yadayim v'raglayim. And I know that way I would have hoped they got further, but I got up to here just to add one detail right now. Since people then did fall on their faces on stone floors, unless they were the great Adam Chashuv, because if I'm not an Adam Chashuv and it doesn't happen, it's not going to be moitzi laz on the prayer. So it was common that people would take a shmata and they would put it in between their forehead and the ground. Even though now we don't fall pisha d'dayim v'raglayim, we continue to put a shmata, to put something in between the forehead and your arm. That's one of the reasons why when we fall on our arms, we use the talis or we use the jacket, as it says in Shulchan Aruch, and not directly on your flesh. It's late, God willing, to be continued.
Sure.
Wow.
Rabbi, where's the Rebbe Eliezer brought down? Where's that Gemara?
That's the Tanach Shalachnoi.
So there's a Rebbe Eliezer and a Rebbe Eliezer.
I think it's Rabbi Eliezer, and if
Nothing to do with each other. Meaning our Gemara right here just finished with Rebbe Eliezer.
Our Gemara is speaking about the Rav.
No, right here at the end.
Yeah. No, the Gemara, if I'm not mistaken, Bava Metzia is recording Rabbi Eliezer. Eliezer Agodo.
Shkoyach.
Go ahead.